Hey, it's always good to hear that music as we get this Wednesday underway. It's time for Helping Seniors of Brevard. And I'm John Harper. Always good to be with you and to have an opportunity to introduce to you the host of Helping Seniors of Brevard, and, by the way, the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. Here is none other than Kerry Fink. Good afternoon, Kerry.
Thank you, John Harper. It's always a pleasure to be here on the radio right here lunchtime every Wednesday on 90.3 FM. WEJF. And also we want to welcome those who join us online at WEJF.net and those who pick this up as a podcast later on as we go along. So on behalf of Joe Steckler, our president and founder, Nancy Deerdorf, who runs our senior information line, and our entire team now at the Senior Resource Center of Brevard there in the beautiful Omni Healthcare building right there on the medical campus in Melbourne, I want to say hello to you and thank you for taking some time with us. This is going to be really an hour well spent because we have in the house with us a real expert. In fact, I was talking about the number of committees and things they call you into because they need your expertise and guidance on this. I'm talking about somebody who's been a friend to the Helping Seniors organization since the day Joe began this, and actually helped Joe back in the Brevard Alzheimer's days when Joe was trying to get everything rolling with the Joe's Clubs and everything else. I'm talking about board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson. How are you today, Bill?
I'm doing great, Kerry. Thanks.
And I was like totally impressed when you started talking about, well, I'm on this committee on this, because you do so much. You're involved in so many things legislatively, everything connected to elder law. You seem like you're the go-to guy.
Well, that's what happens when you volunteer.
But it's important what you do because I know you've served locally here with the Space Coast chapter of the Florida State Guardianship Association and things like that. It's a lot of time in your schedule, so that's why we're so grateful that you're willing to come and be part of our radio shows here on WEJF, because the information, we've talked about this so many times, Bill, the information that people think they know about elder law can get them in real trouble. And so really, particularly in the day and age of internet, and everybody thinks they can just somehow search it, and it's probably even worse now with the fact that artificial intelligence is creeping in, because I guess the maxim is still true when it's dealing with a computer, garbage in, garbage out. You have to know the right questions to ask at the right time, right, Bill?
Correct. And, it'll only guide you so far. It's not going to tell you exactly how to do everything.
Yeah, and we were just having a conversation last week with somebody else, and we were talking about, because we had done we do these every month. We have what we call a senior education series. And the last one we did was actually back over at Zon Beachside. Kara Anderson was simplifying senior living, put it together. It was a panel discussion. Ashley Caswell, who has all the experience, she's director of sales and marketing with Raleigh IT, but her background is all a decade of experience with Hibiscus Court, so she understands and corporate sales and marketing for that entire organization who has assisted livings around the country. So she has a big background. So it was her, a lady named Danica Scuderi, and also I'm trying to think who the third person was on the panel. But it was Rachel McQueen, and it was really who was talking about case management. It was really a good conversation. And what struck me, Bill, was there was three of the people that were in the audience. They were all fairly new to Florida, and so what was happening was we were having this conversation that was very appropriate for them because they'd all come from out of state. They're part of this great influx of everybody moving to Florida. And they all seem very responsible, very intentional about trying to get, their plans ahead correct, which we call getting your ducks in a row, or Joe often calls, making your aging plan. But the thing that we really were having this conversation is, as you move in, you may think you're smart. You may have had great help up north. You may be smart, think you can look things up online, but there's so much nuances like here in Florida that you need to be aware of when it comes to things elder law.
That's very true. Very true.
Yeah. So one of the things that I wanted to, we've done so many shows. And by the way, folks, if you're new to this, I encourage you to check them out. You can go to helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. All the TV shows are there. So are The radio shows that we do with Bill, so are the columns that you submit into the Helping Seniors newsletter published in Senior Scene magazine, and also the TV shows we've done together over the years. Not only going back to some of them with Joe, but much more recent ones where we've talked about things that you need to know to get your aging plan in a row. And one of the things, when I wrote you an email and said, what topic do you think we should do today? And you emailed me back a quote, and that really got my attention. It says, despite increases in assets among middle-class Americans in recent years, 80%, 8 out of 10 of us, older adults, would be unable to afford 2 years of long-term care, according to data from the National Council on Aging. That was a shocking statistic, Bill.
It's very shocking. A lot of, the first thing we should say is when it comes to long-term care, Medicare does not pay for it.
See,
I think that's the first thing we need to tell everybody. So you may want to pay attention to what these numbers we're about to talk about are, because unless you have significant assets, you could run into a very good conundrum when it comes to long-term care.
I really became aware of that personally. This is like 7, 8 years ago when we were helping our aging mothers. And my mom had to go from a hospital stay. Normally she would go to rehab, but she had to go to like a much higher level of care, kind of like a acute care hospital for a period of time before she could finally get to a rehab place. And so by the time she got to the rehab place, I think the way they explained to me, you get like 100 days. I may have this wrong, so I'm saying this as an example, not as a specific. That she could have like 100 days of coverage, of which a certain number was fully covered, and the rest we needed to pay for.
Correct.
And then the question was, well, if she doesn't make it home in the 100 days, or if she comes home after the 100 days, or needs to stay after the 100 days, that would have all been on us. But see, we didn't, as people who are just out there running their daily lives, we would have assumed, oh, well, it's just a Medicare thing, but it's not that simple.
Yeah, that is coverage only for rehab at a nursing home. It pays,
Wow.
Medicare Part B pays 100% of days 1 through 20, and then days 21 through 100, there's a copay of about $175 a day.
That adds up pretty quick.
Correct. And after 100 days, Medicare doesn't pay anything.
And
now that is for rehab. Now, long-term care is beyond that.
Wow. So, and I know I've heard you quote the statistic before, but I just want to get this in everybody's consciousness so that they grab a pencil and really pay attention to what we're going to talk about today. What is an average cost at a nursing home these days?
Well, according to the Florida Department of Children and Families, it's about $10,800 a month. I can tell you in Brevard County, we're above that average because that average includes a lot of the poor counties in Florida. Some nursing homes in Brevard are over $13,000 a month.
So let's say that we think we're really wealthy because we have a home and they're telling us it's worth, I don't know, $200,000-$300,000. But if you would sell your home, you would be out of that money in how many months? That goes back to that quote that we started with, that 80% would run out of money in 2 years for long-term care. And none of us really, I think most of us probably are not even aware that's a problem hanging over our heads, and that there are things, if we would get ahead of it, might be able to help us.
I totally agree with that. And let's run through the other numbers, though.
Okay.
Because we're talking the worst case scenario, which is a nursing home.
Right.
And most people don't want to be in a nursing home, so they want to, either be in assisted living or get care at home. Well, if you're in assisted living, they start at about $3,500 a month for room and board. And then they tack on how much assistance you need. So you can end up paying up to from anywhere $0 to $2,000 more.
Wow.
And then if you're looking at a dementia-specific assisted living, those are like $6,400 a month.
Wow.
So just that alone is very expensive as well. And then you get into home care, and it all depends on how much care you need at home. If you just need somebody to come in and cook and clean once a week, that's not going to be that expensive. But if you need nursing home level of care at your house, you can expect to pay anywhere $8,000 to $12,000 a month for that.
Yeah, it's incredible. Joe has always talked, when he talks about people putting together an aging plan, he always calls it elements of care. And what he means by that is you're trying to match up the level of help that you need for the place that you are right now. So you're not overspending for what you might need now, because you might need that at some point down the road. And I think that's one of the biggest maybe misconceptions. Joe put an article in Hometown News here the other week, and the title of it was "Don't Be an Ostrich," and that's the problem with most of us, is that's what we do. We wait until we're confronted with it, but now our options are limited and everything's going to be a whole lot more expensive.
Correct. You can insure.
Yeah.
And the problem is most people, and I had to go look it up to find out what middle class incomes are in Florida, but generally you're considered middle class if you make between $46,000 and $126,000, and that is for the Orlando area. Obviously, most of us cannot afford to lay out those kinds of monies that are involved in long-term care for any length of time.
So that comes back to the question, and we've done a lot of TV shows, radio shows, where we've talked about this, is that a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Because most of us think like, oh, if I get in trouble, I'll just give the house away to the kids, and then I will go to Medicaid or something like that, and they'll pay for me a place to live. And then we do all these machinations on our own without getting any expert help, and then come to find out that Medicaid isn't going to pay for anything for a while because we gifted all this stuff to everybody down the line. These are things that I don't think the average person walking down the street knows.
Correct. There's a 5-year look back for Medicaid, so you can't just simply give the assets away and then become eligible. There are things you can do to protect the assets, and just realize in Florida, your house is protected.
Right.
Because of our state constitution. So Medicaid or the nursing home can't touch your house in Florida. A lot of people come here from other states. I actually went and looked it up. There are only 8 other states where your house is protected.
Really?
So in 42 other states, Medicaid puts a lien on your house if you get services through them.
So this is exactly what we were talking about at the top of the show, that I found it so interesting that really in Florida, we do have some fairly decent protections for seniors, but they only will help you if you know that they exist. So if you come in, you're new to Florida, you moved here, you retired from, up north someplace or in the Midwest, and you come to Florida and you say, well, I think I've got all my documents together because I had a really good law firm, up in Chicago help me put this together. You still need somebody with the expertise here to see how it fits into the context of everything that's available to protect you in Florida.
Exactly, because there are different rules. Each state has its own constitution, so there are different protections given to debtors, and Florida is got some good ones for protecting assets.
So let's talk about how do we make long-term care affordable, because obviously it's clearly not, and we can wait for the government to step in and do something. And I love that saying, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to anybody that works in a government job. We appreciate what you do, but there is something bureaucratic that happens in government. I'm here from the government. I'm here to help you, and the intention may be good, but it doesn't often or always work as well as we want it to.
So in some of the northwestern states now, you can have you can opt in for a deduction from your payroll that goes into a fund that helps pay for long-term care if you need it.
Wow.
So it's like a payroll deduction, and so they've authorized that. The big one that comes to mind is Washington State.
Okay.
So they're trying to take this head on. I don't know what happens if, like, say, in Washington State, you pay into this system and then you move. Well, does it follow you to other states? I don't know the details of that, but that is, that article I sent you, that's one of the things they talk about in there.
Well, I was thinking that even as you were saying that goes back to the fact that everything goes by states. I can tell you that Nancy and Joe over the years have dissuaded people from coming to Florida if they don't have a certain amount of savings and things, because they would call up, I'm just making this up. They would call up, maybe they live in the state of New Jersey, and they call up and say, well, I want to come to Florida because I like the weather better. but I need my housing voucher, I need my food voucher, I need all these things that I get up there. And then our answer is that's a New Jersey thing. It's not a Florida thing.
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, you do have to look very, very carefully state by state. And Bill, that's one of the things that I know we spend so much time. People just think like, oh, we're just grandstanding, saying you got to talk to an elder law attorney, but what you don't know can hurt you.
And the other thing I get in my office a lot is people who say, "Oh, mom, dad, come down from up north, live with us, we'll take care of you." And I get a ton of those people who come in the office. They've been doing it for 2 years. They're worn out. They can't handle it anymore. They can't work.
Right.
So relying on family as your backup, you're basically asking them to quit their job and take care of you full time. And then we're just kicking the can down the road to that generation, because then they won't have any savings to pay for any care.
What you're saying is so true, because, I mean, they call it the sandwich generation, right? You're still trying to raise your kids, and you're also trying to look after mom and dad. And that's one of the things that I think we talk about a lot. Joe's whole point is you got to make an aging plan. You got to think about the things that you're going to run into as you get older. We euphemistically, in the helping seniors world these days, we're calling it, we want to help you get your ducks in a row with the caveat, don't try this on your own. Get the help. There's so much good help out there here in this county because it is so senior focused that you need to get to the right people to help you make that plan. But
and literally, how many people out there who are going to make $40,000, $50,000 a year in retirement can afford to pay a $500 a month long-term care insurance bill?
Right. And then Joe says, because Joe, I remember early on, you guys did some TV shows where you were talking about long-term care insurance. And even then, this is like 10 years ago, I remember Joe saying it's harder and harder to find companies that do these.
Right. I mean, literally $500, a month.
$6,000 a year.
That's a big chunk of your income just to insure against a long-term care situation.
And then even when you have that, there's still things, right? Isn't there, I don't know if the right word is an elimination period or something, or what do they call it?
Right, where you have to pay out of your own pocket for, usually it's 3 months.
Okay.
And you pay for 3 months out of your own pocket, and then the policy will kick in.
Starts to kick in. So if somebody comes in your office and they say, hey, listen, I heard you guys talking about this on the radio. Now you've got me thinking, you maybe even got me a little bit worried. What are the kind of things that you would sit down and lead a family through and say, okay, here's some things we should talk through?
Well, that's a great question, because I've had just recently, last few weeks, I've had multiple people coming in because they have gotten policy increase notices for their long-term care insurance. And it seems virtually every company out there is trying to jack their rates up to cover the losses.
Yeah.
So, And so we sit down and we look at, well, how much coverage do you have? How much do you need? Do you need the cost of living rider? What is the daily benefit? How much is this insurance going to pay? Is it going to cover the cost of nursing home? Is it going to cover the cost of assisted living? Is it going to cover the cost of care at home? Now, sometimes we make a decision to cut the daily rate down to make a savings on the premium to cover assisted living, because we know if they need nursing home level of care, I've looked at their assets and say, well, we probably can get you on Medicaid, but for Medicaid in Florida also pays for services at home or in assisted living, but there's a waiting list.
Oh, okay.
And you could be on that waiting list 6 months to 2 years. So it would be better to have at least some coverage to pay for assisted living, and knowing that if they got really bad and went to the nursing home, there is no waiting list for nursing home services. So, we cover the gap in between kind of thing.
Wow. And this is really why you can't be trying this on your own. There's no way, each of us typically will face aging, I would say once or twice. And I mean, obviously for ourselves, only once, but maybe you're concerned about mom or dad or another family member. So you're going to probably be impacted at some place along the line, but you're dealing with this every day. You just taught me something new I didn't know. I would not have necessarily thought I would want to talk to an elder law attorney about where I stand on my long-term care policy. I would have thought, well, probably I just talked to the insurance agent that sold it to me.
Well, the thing in the article I think is very interesting is it says 50% of adults over, I think, age 65 will have
require
long-term care event. Now, I've seen some breakouts of that statistic, and generally, it's about half of that 50%, which is the really troublesome long-term, multiple-year kind of thing. The other 25% is typically a much shorter duration. But, yeah, so it's a big number of people who are going to be affected by this. I just read another article. It was on CNBC that talks about the things you should be worried about in retirement. And number one in there is healthcare. Not only your prescription drugs and your premiums, but also long-term care.
Yeah, it's unbelievable when you think about it, because most of us would say, well, my retirement idea is which beach am I going to sit on? It's that we're not thinking about the things we need to be thinking about. We're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson with the law office, William A. Johnson, PA. So, Bill, we're getting ready to take our mid-show break. We're going to come back and stay on this topic of long-term care and how to make it work for you. And again, if you're listening to this, you really need to stand close by with a piece of paper and kind of jot down some of these notes. But especially, I think you probably want to jot down Bill's number and say, like, I might need some help. I need you to look at my situation, or I just need to learn more. What other resources should I tackle? How do they get in touch with your office?
They can call us at 321-253-1667.
And you have a great website too, FloridaElderLaw.net, right?
Correct.
And you've got a resource there that everybody should download. It's called the the aging
The Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
See,
and you can download it right off the website.
You got to do that. So we're going to be back in just a few moments with the second half of Helping Seniors Radio. See you there.
And we're ready to get the second half of Helping Seniors of Brevard underway. Let's get back to the show and introduce to you, or reintroduce, the host of the show and the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. Here is Kerry Fink. Kerry?
Thank you, John Harper. It's always great to continue this conversation. Boy, it's been a real, I think, educational, helpful conversation. And even though we're tackling a subject that may be a little bit frightening, I think you're going to get some real hope and some real ideas out of the second half of our show as well. And I want to bring right back into the conversation a very special guest, longtime friend of the Helping Seniors organization. He's board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson with the law office of William A. Johnson, PA. And I read a sort of a shocking statistic that was in this article that prompted us to have a conversation about long-term care at the opening of this bill. And so I want to read the other shocking kind of like headline in here that people really need to get into their consciousness so we can have a real open and honest discussion about. We need to think about this and not just get pushed around by waves on the sea. Much better to have a motor in your boat and be steering than just see, well, which wave is going to take me down. And this was this line that we were talking about during the mid-show break, Bill. Over the 2 decades, a quarter of U.S. adults, that means 25% of us, 50 and older, will experience such a financial shock, it will undercut at least 75% of their net wealth, according to the report. And I would believe that probably has a lot to do with the health situation, right?
Yeah, in the article they say that definitely a long-term care event is one of the financial shocks. They're also talking about, things like divorce and stuff like that. But I found that pretty interesting that, between 50 and 70, that there is 25% of people will lose 75% of their wealth.
Wow, and this is stuff you work for your whole life to get you there, right?
Correct. I'm sure exploitation's probably in there too.
Oh wow, that is a huge point too. But during the first half of the show, and I encourage you, if you're listening to us here on 90.3 FM WEJF or online at WEJF.net, stay tuned. Even if you missed the first part of the show, you can go back and pick this up as a podcast. We put this out on YouTube. We put this out on Facebook. We want you to have this information because during the first half of the show, one of the things that we were learning from Bill was, and I didn't know this before we started the show, is that sitting down and talking to an elder law attorney, especially somebody who's board certified, understands the ins and outs and the nuances, particularly of Florida law. And that's really important. If you're here in Florida, you got to have it viewed through that lens of Florida law, is the fact that you could actually sit down and look at your long-term care coverage with the advice and guidance of an elder law attorney who is really trying to look at the big picture and help you navigate this the right way.
Correct, because they know that, they will know what things cost.
Right.
How much a daily rate is.
Right.
What an elimination period means.
Right.
The things that you need in the analysis of whether or not you should keep your long-term care policy, because there might be other options available to you.
Yeah.
And we really haven't talked about, the main goal here is finding, getting, and paying for good care. Right. That is the ultimate goal. And there are many ways we can get to that end goal. And we have to look at each person's finances, what they may or may not be eligible for. Can we get them on Medicaid to help defray some of these costs? Can we get them on VA benefits, aid and attendance being the main one? Are there any other public resources that are available out there that we can utilize to help defray the costs? So that's the main goal is finding, getting, and paying for good care.
Well, one of the things we said at the opening of the show, right, was that a lot of us have labored under the misconception that, if I get into trouble, Medicaid is just going to help me. And while there is maybe a granule of truth to that, there's so many ways it can get all loused up for quite a period of time, especially if you start taking the rules into your own hands and you make a few knee-jerk moves and then things get really out of hand. And Bill, I guess that's one of the things when we've talked about this so many times, you prefer to sit down with a senior and work things out. Well, there's plenty of options rather than all of a sudden mom or dad is in a facility and they can't go home safely. And now we're scrambling trying to figure out what to do.
I would say 80% of what we do in the long-term care field is crisis.
Right. Well, which is on the one hand, it's probably a lot of business for you, but it's really the toughest way to do it because it could be done simpler. It could be done so much simpler and more beneficially because the person would have a lot of options if they would just come talk to you before.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, or they've made wrong moves like selling the house or things we were, talking about at the beginning of the show, or transferring the house to their kids or moving assets to their kids. If they've made wrong moves, then we got to undo all the bad planning that went in and start putting in place the good planning.
There's so many nuances to this. I've always had this conversation. I said, when you start looking at the resources you have to work with, you have to look at, there's one definition, it's income, but there's another definition, which is what do you have left over when you finish paying everybody that feels like they need to be paid from your income. I'm talking about taxes. I'm talking about your other living expenses. And you're always trying to work on that margin that you have left over so you can do things. And Bill, I think one of the things that, I'm saying this as a fact, but I really want you to say if I'm barking up the right tree or maybe make it a better statement, is that one of the real benefits of sitting down with someone like yourself who really understands the nuances is you're able to look at somebody's complete situation, the income, the assets, where they are health-wise, what things are going on, what might be expected, and then put that against the backdrop of all the experience you've had of seeing this done well and seeing it not done well over the years to help somebody really craft a good plan.
That is correct. That's exactly what we do. And we have to, have the whole picture too. We have to know what their income assets are, what options are available to them. So we need to really have that whole picture so we can guide them in the right way.
And there's so many nuances, right? Like we talked about, well, there's people who've come into Florida recently, but there's a whole nother like segment of this, right? It's people who may have done some planning, 10, 15 years ago, but now a lot of the people in their lives may have changed, and that planning may not be consistent with where they are or where they think they're going now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, estate planning and doing your documents, a lot of people view that as a one and done thing.
Right.
I done them. It's over. I don't have to redo it. And they never go back and check their documents or keep up with the changes in the law.
Well, I was going to say, and that in the absence, maybe there was no family changes or anything else, but something may have shifted in the laws that require some adjustment. I know I've heard you talk many times about that people arrive in Florida with a power of attorney that was maybe drafted in another state, and it can be problematical here in Florida because the rules are so different for how those are worked with.
Especially from Illinois, New York, and Connecticut are three that come to mind that the power of attorney in those states just won't cut it in Florida.
Yeah. So when we talk about trying to figure out a path for long-term care, if somebody wants to be intelligent about it, maybe proactive, maybe heed the call, what would you say that they should do next? I mean, what are the steps you would take?
Well, it would be akin to financial planning.
Yeah.
Is, come in, bring your assets and income information. If you have long-term care insurance, bring the policy. If you're a veteran, let's see if you're eligible for VA benefits. And kind of look at all the different things that may be available to you.
One of the things that I think I'm saying this well, but I walk away with kind of a sense of comfort that there is some real tools that with the help of somebody that really knows how the system is constructed and how to do everything correctly and above board, you could really get some benefit out of Medicaid or VA aid and attendance, but you have to know how to set these things up right because like you talked about look back periods and probably, I hate filling out government applications, right? Because you get to a question and you're not sure. It's like, well, it's yes or no, but it's not that simple,
Exactly. And if you click the wrong box, you may be making 12 hours of work for yourself.
Right. So if somebody comes in, like I know generically along the way, we've done TV and radio shows. We've talked about Medicaid planning. We've talked about VA aid and attendance and some of these benefits that may be available. But over the years, I've seen this change where I remember at one time VA aid and attendance did not have a look back period. Am I saying that right?
Correct.
And then now it does.
Yeah, in 2018, in October, they changed that.
Yeah.
And installed the 3-year look-back period.
So, and the same with Medicaid, right? That goes, you have to be careful with everything you've done over a 5-year period, or you could really harm yourself with what you're hoping to get benefit-wise out of something like that.
Correct.
And it's things that we don't think, like, oh, I don't need my car anymore, so I gave it to my kid. They're going to inherit the house anyway, so let me just put them on the title, blah, blah, blah.
Those little gifts can add up and create big disqualification periods.
Right. And so as again, simplifying it, when you get a disqualification period, it means that somehow you got to figure out how to pay that part until you wind through that.
Out of your pocket.
So you sold your house for $200,000, or you gave your house to your kid for a couple $100,000, and you said then they take that somehow and divide it out like $10,000 a month, or some kind
correct.
of like,
they add up all the gifts in the 5 years prior to applying for Medicaid, divide by roughly 10,000.
Wow.
And that's the number of months you cannot get benefits from the time you're approved.
You could die in that amount of time.
Oh yes, yeah, most definitely.
Wow. So getting this right is not optional. It's really so important. And it's funny when we see all these commercials on TV, oh, you can do your legal documents yourself. We wanted to make this so simple for you. And they never, it's too complicated. You can't make it that simple.
Correct. It's never, as I've said on the show, and I just said this today in my office at my first appointment, is about 50% of the things I see people do online are done wrong.
Right, which is, by the way, that's a big business for you. I mean, I'm not saying it in a bad way, but people walk in and they thought, well, I went down to the office supply store, I got this document, or, I found it online for $100 and I just put this together. And we've talked about this so many times. The problem, especially with elder law documents, is you don't really get an opportunity to do over, because the minute it needs to work, there is no option to fix something that's wrong.
Correct. Usually that's when the person's incapacitated and can't sign new documents.
So one of the things, and that's, by the way, one of the reasons that Helping Seniors is a nonprofit, is we are so strongly always, Joe, from the day that Joe started this, and I remember when I met Joe, and he, because my background is media, and he said, Kerry, he said, I want to do the same things I used to do at Brevard Alzheimer's. We offer all these services through Joe's clubs and things like that, but he said, one of the things I always felt strongly about was getting information in the hands of seniors and their families so they can make the best plans that they can going forward. And so through that, he said, that's why I want to do, in Helping Seniors, the radio, the TV, all the different things we try to do, because we're trying to get people to just jump ahead, think a minute ahead, and think not only the peace of mind you're going to get, the savings that you're likely going to get because you're not in the middle of all this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you look at that, as you were saying earlier in the show, or I guess during the break as well, you got to also look at the totality of everything. When you're talking about whether or not somebody's going to pay a $500 a month long-term care insurance premium, and then you look at, well, can they pay their bills?
Right.
What about the homeowner's insurance that's gone through the roof in Florida? What about the cost of food that's gone through the roof? Back in 2007, I had people call up my office and cancel appointments, seniors, because they could not afford the gas to get to my office.
I think that's part of the challenge, right? Is figuring out how to allocate scarce resources so that we do this the right way.
Right. When you're working, you can always make more money. When you're on a fixed income, a lot of things change.
So we're back to that basic premise that a nursing home care can cost more than $100,000 a year. That's a big number, Bill.
Yeah, and like I told you, in Florida, the average is over 10,000, so that's 120,000 a year.
Wow.
And in Brevard, there's some that are over 13,000, so that's about 150,000 a year.
So the best advice to somebody would be maybe go online, floridaelderlaw.net, as a place to begin. Look for that document that you just have. It's right there. You can download it, and it's called the
Florida Long-Term Care and Nursing Home Answer Book.
And you've been doing this for years. I know you publish it in Boomer. When the Boomer Guide comes out, everybody loves to go grab that because they know you're going to have an updated version in there. There is so much information in there, and I remember reading it, and I thought, this is going to be really boring. It's going to be really complex. It's going to be technical. It's going to be above my ability to follow it. But you did a really good job of breaking it down to really practical concerns and presented it in a way that's easy for people to digest and go like, I need to pay attention to this.
Right, and that's what we tried to do, is put it in layman's terms.
And if somebody wants to get a hold of you and maybe say, I really would like to, I know you do seminars all the time, like at One Senior Place and things like that, but maybe they want to get some more information, maybe even make an appointment and talk to you about their particular situation. How does that process all work?
They just called the office at 321-253-1667.
So really good conversation on long-term care with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson. So what I want to do with a couple of minutes left in the radio show is talk about fundraising for Helping Seniors of Brevard, because it occurred to me, and I was saying this to you, Bill, today is actually 4 months. It's literally the 4-month day, however you want to put it on the calendar, because today is June 7th. But on October 7th, we are going to find out who's the winner of the 7th annual Helping Seniors car raffle. That's the fundraiser where if we pull your winning ticket on that day, And no, you do not have to be present to win. So even if you say, I'm a snowbird, I'll be up in, in Canada by then or whatever, it's okay. We pull your ticket. You're still the winner. You still get the car, and you get your choice of a car. And this year, Bill, there's 5 cars. They all come from A.J. Hire's fine dealership collection. So it is really about the Dodge and Chevy this year because they're saying that this could be the last year that you could get the Dodge Challenger. And I just heard that they're saying this is the last year you can get the Chevrolet Camaro because they're getting rid of the gas models and trying to move everything, I guess, electric. So the point is, I think it's going to really come down to Dodge versus Chevy this year. So last year, if you remember, our winner was a local lady from West Melbourne. She was there that night at the American Muscle Car Museum. Mark Pylock's lovely wife pulls out the ticket, and Mark reads off the numbers, and she was over there in a corner, and they start poking her. That's your number. That's your number. And she comes up on stage, and Mark asks her, which car do you want to win? And she's like, throws her hands up in the air and goes, that Camaro. So she's driving around in a Camaro. Now, I think it was 2 years before, the gentleman who won, this was in the height of COVID, he was local. He's from Indiana. He chose a Camaro. In between, the person chose the Kia Sportage. But the year before that, the lady who won, who was also local, said, I want a Dodge Challenger. But I really wonder if this year it's going to come down to Dodge versus Chevy. But, so you could take a Dodge Challenger, you could take a Chevy Camaro, you can take a Mazda Miata convertible, you can take a Kia Sportage, or this year, because AJ's now opened up a Mitsubishi dealership right there on US 1, you can take a Mitsubishi Outlander. So it's your choice. You pick which car you want to win. And AJ and Joe, as Joe said, he said, I've been working with AJ. We've been giving away cars to raise money for charity since the mid-90s. So Joe is an old pro at this, and AJ has always been so kind to help us out. So 1 ticket for $25, 5 tickets for a $100 donation, and you're in it to win it. It's really that simple. And here's the thing. Like I said, you don't have to be present to win. But if you are in town, you are invited because your ticket is also admit one to the American Muscle Car Museum on that night. And I was just talking with Tara Bush, who's the publisher of FloridaCarshows.com. That's one of those sites that everybody who's a car aficionado, you go there to figure out where the great car shows. And she goes, Kerry, she goes, I think most of the audience who are into cars, it's all going to be about the Dodge and the Chevy this year, and the Muscle Car Museum. She goes, because that is a private museum, as you know, Bill, because you've been there. It's 400 cars now, and it's not open to the public. You can only go there when Mark has an event going on. A lot of the times, it's a high-end black tie, $250 a person kind of entrance thing because it's a fundraiser for a nonprofit. But Mark has graciously offered every year since he's been open to make it available. You show your Helping Seniors car raffle ticket and come on into the show. It's a great night, if nothing else. And I always go like this, Bill. For $100, you get 5 tickets, so that's 5 chances to win. You're helping the work of Helping Seniors, and not only that, you're going in. You can't go to get pizza and a movie for 5 people for $100. That's never going to happen. And you're going to get a great night at the museum, and Mark springs for all kinds of beer, wine, refreshments, and things there at the facility. So it's just a great automotive night. Bill, you've got tickets in your office. People can, if they call you or come by, they can get tickets right there. Where are you guys?
Yep, we have them right in the office.
Yeah. So let's give that number one more time. Another reason to call Bill's office.
321-253-1667.
And I want to remind folks, too, because it's a nonprofit, people assume it's real easy for nonprofits to get money. And nothing could be farther from the truth. The services we can do go only as far as you allow us to. So if you'll help us, we can help more seniors. And Joe's been doing this now, since his last command in the Navy was helping seniors with the being in charge of the retirement home there in Gulfport, Mississippi. Joe's 89. He still works every day in the Helping Seniors fight. And, it's so important. It's getting more important, Bill, every day, like we're talking about. There's more seniors and more things to do, more people moving in. And we've got to be prepared for this. So when you get your Helping Seniors car raffle ticket, you're making all this possible. You can get your tickets at Bill Johnson's law office. You can call Nancy Deerdorf on our Helping Seniors number, 321-473-7770. I will say that one more time to give you a second to grab a pencil. 321-473-7770. You can get them safely and securely online, helpingseniors.carraffle.com, or you could go check out the car that you want to win at the Boniface Hires car dealerships, because they've all got tickets too. Bill, talk about the night at the museum. It's so much fun to see all those cars.
It is. It's an amazing collection. If you like Fords, there's a ton of those, and then you get further in the back, and there is just every kind of model and make you can think of.
Yeah, I was asking Andrew Mackey, who's a really great friend over there who helps us. He's kind of the head guy that, in terms of functioning and for events and things like that, helps make us look great. I always say, Mark, you and D. Dick, who's the operations manager for the whole museum, and Andrew, I said, you guys make us look like $1 million. We show up with a car, give away the car, but you guys have the whole show, and it's really terrific. And I asked him, I said, that front room alone, I said, you told me a couple of years ago it was worth $5 million. How much is it worth now? He goes, Kerry, I can't even begin to tell you. He said, there's a car in the center of that is a prototype. And he said, all I can tell you is Mark traded $5 million cash and 5 other cars so that he could have that one car in the center.
Wow.
So go figure that one out. So and that's my point, even if you were there last year with us and had a great time, you need to come back, because Mark is always getting new stuff in there. So it's like a whole new experience every time you go.
Very true.
So you get your Helping Seniors car raffle tickets, and we will look forward to seeing you there. One other quick note just before we close out, the Helping Seniors Travel Club cruise is on. There's 2 sailings. There's a 3-night sailing October 12th and a 7-night sailing October 15th, all from Port Canaveral. Great pricing on the MSCC side. So you also want to call Nancy at 321-473-7770, or go to helpingseniorstravelclub.com. Learn about that opportunity. It's a fundraiser, because when you buy your ticket, it's not like we ask you for money on board. It's that MSC gives part of the proceeds back, and that's a donation into the Helping Seniors world. So it is absolutely worth checking out. It's a great vacation value and all that. So Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney with the law office of William A. Johnson. One more time, FloridaElderLaw.net is the website to get a hold of that long-term care guide book that is so important to start with. And if they want to call your office,
321-253-1667.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill, and we will look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, right here, 12 noon on 90.3 FM WEJF Radio. Thanks for being part of the Helping Seniors family.